postpone buying anything to 2011, keep the money in your pocket and do something else with it. They thought that was an interesting idea. So they decided to do that. The funny thing was that one of the big Dutch IT press magazines was already printed by the time we were having that meeting. So on Friday, the paper said, municipality of Groningen buys 1.5 million worth of Microsoft software, and obviously they hadn't, so that was kind of funny. They were a bit behind there. And then they said, we're going to use half the money to develop a migration scenario. So we're going to hire 4 guys locally, municipality, and we're going to, give them a couple of €100,000 to just develop a migration scenario, investigate what is required to go to alternatives and how much time it will take and all that stuff. And then the other half of the money we'll put in the bank and it'll just, get interest, and it's always good. And then in 2010, we're going to reevaluate. And, even if we don't decide to migrate, we'll have this migrate document, and that will be a very nice sort of, piece of the negotiation with any, potential vendor, because then we'll say, well, we have this migration document here to something that's free, that's already paid. So how much percentage, reduction are you going to give us? 80% or 90%? That will be sort of the discussion. And of course, so money in the bank and 4 new jobs, which is always nice in a city with a high unemployment. Now, the province of Groningen, which is sort of the whole area around it, that's the sort of the middle layer of Dutch government. You have national, province, and local. This is sort of the middle layer. They had a new IT plan for the next 5 years. And on open source, it said, there is no support for open source, period. That was the only thing it says about open source. So we thought, well, we need to do something here. And so we did some stuff. And then we had a new version of the strategic IT plan for 5 years, and it says, oh, we're going to do things with open office, open standards are important, local knowledge economy, interoperability, all those lovely buzzwords. And the difference is that 4 people, went up there and each talked for 4 minutes to the provincial council. That was it. Now, it takes about a day to prepare those 4 minutes, so it's not totally trivial, but it is relatively trivial in terms of effort to get this done. And the council was totally surprised that 4 people came to talk to them about this subject. So they sort of woke up, oh, this must be important, we'll have to study it further. And so they sort of, told their civil servants to really look into it and come up with a new plan. And then those civil servants, of course, started mailing us for help, basically, because they were a bit lost. And so we got all our buzzwords in the plan. So then last year, the Dutch government imploded for the umpteenth time, and we got new elections, and we got a new cabinet. And we got the Labour Party into parliament, and then for the first time we had sort of a direct line of communications to somebody actually in power. Instead of talking to members of parliament, we could now talk to somebody who's actually running part of the government. So that was a whole new ball game for us. And we had to make it attractive for him to do something. We have to make it attractive for him to stick his neck out. This is the Minister for Economic Affairs of the Netherlands, young guy, under 40. Works all over the world, and not so long in government, so he still has a fairly fresh mind on things, and he's interested, he wants to do new things. And so we needed to make it attractive for him to help us and to stick his neck out. So that's what we set out to do, basically. And so at some point we got our first meeting with him. Now, we took a long time in preparing that, and in retrospect, I'm really glad we did that. So, you get a 45-minute meeting. Now, you have to understand, of course, what we think this is all very important, but you are not as important as the Saudi ambassador coming to talk about, oil stuff. So if that guy shows up, you're out. It's that simple. So you need to make sure you get the core message across fast, because any meeting can be cut short at any time, because this thing is not as important as 1,000 other government stuff. Make it attractive to do something rather than nothing. So you need to show that there may be a risk, but there's an upside there somewhere. And you can tell these people lots of stuff in a quick time. They're smart. Well, this one is anyway. You need to help their staff too, because it's all new for them generally. So you need to have a thick info package with maybe demo CDs and lots of printed out articles and papers and stuff and slides and whatever. And the minister may have only 45 minutes, but his staff, which is a large group of civil servants, they have a lot more time. So, make sure you take the rest of the afternoon off so you can go talk with them. And of course, pretty pictures can be helpful, so I'll show you some of it. And this entire presentation is Creative Commons licensed, so you can download it from the CCC site afterwards and have some fun with it. This is a picture one of our graphics guy made. This is what the Netherlands spends yearly on proprietary software licenses. Mostly this goes to North America. So it leaves our economy, enters the North American economy. That represents about 100,000 jobs, which basically we don't have in the Netherlands, but that is exported to America, which is kind of stupid. So it's a bling-bling vendor lock that we're all paying for to the tune of about 1% of our gross national product. So this picture really sort of showed the scope of the problem for the minister in one very nice picture that you need to have printed out on a big piece of paper and just give it to him and don't ask for it back and stuff like that. Don't be cheap. So this is how I explain to people the value of open standards. Open standards is like a common language, and if you want to do big, difficult building projects like this one, that was attempted once, long ago, if you don't have a common language, if you can't talk to each other, if you can't share information, then the things end badly, generally. So it's nothing...
It failed that way.
Yeah, well, exactly. Because they couldn't understand each other, because suddenly they had, instead of one common language, they had 15 proprietary non-communicating languages, and then the whole thing went badly. And of course, this is often the state of many big government IT projects, and lack of open standards, of course, is clearly one of the things. So another way to explain it is containers. It's not about the boat, it's about the container. A container can be used to store all kinds of stuff, from trees to data centers or anything, and you can put it in all kinds of modes of transportation, but it's the standard definition of the container. It's an iron box, it's a certain size and stuff like that, that makes it flexible, because for the lorry driver, it does not matter what's in the container. Right? And you can switch modes of transportation. It's very flexible. It's sort of like the internet, where you have this middle layer, you have the services on top, it's the stuff that we have it for, like web and voice over IP and mail and stuff, and you have devices, the shiny things. But it's the middle layer that most people never talk about, but that's the important stuff. Because how is it possible that we have, 2 billion devices now hanging off the internet, all talking to each other? They're made by thousands of different vendors, and they have all kinds of different operating systems and applications, but they still can, share all this stuff. It's the middle layer, so that's what's important. So this is IT architecture for beginners, basically, and other politicians. Services, that's the stuff that politicians always talk about, right? E-government, blah, 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 blah. And devices and software, that's what the techies always like to talk about. The newest laptop or whatever, or the best operating system, and my Linux distribution is more scarce than yours and stuff like that. But it's the middle layer that's, of course, where the action is. Because if you have open standards, then the interoperability can occur. If you don't have open standards, basically, you're beholden to one or two vendors who will screw you out of a lot of money. Now, this is about source code. Not going to elaborate too much. I presume most people here know it. So that's how that works in a single page. Basically, you can explain this fast to someone. It's not hard. And this is what vendor lock is. Hardware layer commoditized, and the middle stuff very sort of vendor locked, because all these layers are tied together. And if you have the one, you need to buy all the other stuff, whether you like it or not. And then, of course, are you still the boss of your own information as a government? And if you do nothing, of course, it gets worse and worse and worse. And at some point, you're going to be totally sort of privatized, basically. So what you should strive for is say, okay, we have two flavors of software. One flavor is the generic stuff. That's the stuff that everybody has, like an operating system, word processors, file servers, web servers, databases, all that stuff, which is most of IT, most anywhere. And they only have special applications, say a management system for the sewage infrastructure of the city of Amsterdam. Now you need to either have somebody build that or make it yourself, whatever, code it yourself, but own it yourself. Be the owner of the intellectual property, so you're not being controlled by an external company. And then, of course, you need to make sure that you can swap out all these layers and replace them by another commodity product. That's good IT architecture, basically. Also, what I learned through bitter experience, I might add, is that sometimes it's strategically clever to just talk about open standards, because some people think this free software, open source stuff is, that's scary, and it's made by bearded people and stuff like that. But open standards is really, it's very hard to argue against open standards. It's very, very hard politically. So go there first, and then sort of, chuck in open source if it's possible afterward, basically. So that's in the Netherlands why we set up the Open Document Society, which is a non-profit organization that teaches, educates, and lobbies for open document formats chiefly, and other sort of open standards, but open document formats is now our primary thing. And of course, if anybody wants to set up sort of a national branch in other European countries, please go to the site and tell us you want to get going, or come talk to me and I'll hook you up with the right people. Now, so over the last summer we wrote a new policy document. We put lots of input into it, and from the talk page on Pentabarf, there was actually a link to the document in English. So you can download it and you can translate it and do beautiful things with it in your country. I'm pushing the government to release it under Creative Commons, so you can actually do that without any legal fears of being, having done terrible things to you. And they've said they're going to do that, but we need to have the lawyers look at it a bit more. 3 main things. What's it for? It needs to improve interoperability in the public sector. That is government plus all the other stuff that is sort of semi-tax funded, so schools and hospitals and libraries and all that stuff, which basically means 40 to 50% of all of Dutch society. It needs to improve the functioning, or it needs to lower the dependence on vendors, and we want to improve the functioning of IT markets and thereby supporting the Dutch knowledge economy. Those are the 3 goals of the policy. Now, lots of stuff has been said, and certainly in the Dutch IT press, certain companies have been lobbying like crazy to, say all kinds of things about what the policy is and is not. And since I wrote part of it, I think I know something about it. So these are some of the facts, what it says. ODF becomes mandatory in next summer for a national government, and then it becomes a mandatory all over the year after that, and the rest of the public sector, which is the schools, hospitals, can trail 12 months. Open standards in general, you need to use them unless it's not available. If you have a clear business need to use AutoCAD and there is no open alternative, and you can demonstrate that, by all means use that. The first year will have no sanctions, but in 2009 there will be sort of audits on compliance, and if people don't comply, then some sanctions will be devised. We're still working on that one, what that exactly will be. If governments are going to get new software, they need to get open source if that is of equal functionality. I think that is really great to sort of open up the market and give open source an equal chance in a market that doesn't really work. There is now a budget to do promotion, education, and pilots and stuff like that. So the government organizations who sort of are the first movers, who take a bit of risk, they get some support. So that's good. The government is going to look into if it's possible to do separate hardware and software pricing in the Dutch market. So this is really something for consumers. So you'll have your, whatever Toshiba laptop lying in the window, and they'll say the laptop is so many euros, and then, the Windows license on it is that much, and the Norton antivirus that comes with it is that much, and the Power DVD. And if you say, I don't want all of that, then you get your money back for that part, which really lowers the cost of your laptop and doesn't send any money to corporations you may not like. So that's good. And of course, the Dutch Antitrust Authority has been asked to investigate. Now, they have been asked sort of in a way that says, you need to do this because otherwise there will be political trouble. I just got a letter from them just before coming to Berlin that they say they're not going to because they don't see any problem. So I think next January, when the Parliament is back from its Christmas holidays, there will be political trouble because basically Parliament has been asking them unanimously for 5 years to look into it. If they don't want to do that, there is going to be a shitstorm. Now, there's also some FUD going around about the plan. It doesn't make open source mandatory. I mean, it doesn't. If you have a good reason for not using open source, fine, use something else. It doesn't forbid specific products. So, if you want to use Pico or VI to generate those ODF files, go ahead, or any other, piece of technology. It doesn't forbid specific standards. So if a government organization wants to, publish their documents in ODF, but also wants to produce them in Betamax, we're fine with that. It's cool. Or any other standard, of course. So this was our interesting day, December 12th. Intense lobbying by Microsoft. Now, we wrote briefings for both the members of parliament and the minister, which sort of helped the process along. It's called playing two sides of the game, and it really helps. And we added some new ideas into that to move the debate away from the core policy, because what we didn't want to happen is that in the parliament debate, the plan would basically be, nibbled at the edges. So we said, we're going to put in a bunch of new ideas, and we put them in both briefs. And so they discussed that and didn't discuss the policy, it's the core document, and that was adopted sort of in one go. So that worked. And basically, the members of parliament and the minister were reading our mails to each other and agreeing, and everybody was happy and dancing in the sun and all that stuff. So it was really, really very cool. So some final points. Tiny, tiny country there. It's called the Netherlands, which right now is leading the charge in Europe in terms of policy, not necessarily in adoption, mind you. Of course, Norway has been doing comparable things. December 19th, they published their policy. Belgium has had a federal ODF policy for over a year, but right now they don't have a federal government, which